yesterday's distribution of these new national policy statements. I think there are 20 of them. The consultation process goes from everything to do from coastal policy statements, in other words, how the coast is going to be worked out and what sediment you can put out there, and consent priorities in the coastal environment. There's environmental standards for commercial forestry. There are environmental standards for marine aquaculture, for God's sake. A policy statement on productive, highly productive land, which is what our next guest will be interested in. There were talking about amendments to the quarrying and mining national policy statements, and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on. And that was released yesterday. Well, our next guest is ironically, because we've just got everything planned, the best person possibly to comment on that. In the context of a report that they were the author or co-author of, we'll find out in a second, which was, as I said, put out by the Lincoln University and the ASB Bank, on the idea that New Zealand land is not being properly farmed or utilised, I think is the best way to describe it, to maximise it for producing food and fibre, but also in terms of supporting the environment and a whole series of other good stuff as well. Joining us now to talk about that, I think he's the author or co-author of the report, we'll find out soon, from Lincoln University, Professor Alan Renwick, and he joins us now. Professor, welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
Co-author, author?
Author of the report, yeah. Well, co-author, we had a number of people in our centre also contributed to the report, yeah.
So this is a report that, ASB Bank commissioned you to do, or you decided this is a good idea and we went and then got their funding?
I guess they commissioned us to do it. We were in discussion with ASB and they were looking to do something, and together we came up with this as a topic to look at. We felt a lot of work had been done telling us that things would change if we meet our climate change agreements, those sorts of things. But what we felt was missing was the how. If we are going to have land use change, what's actually needed to support that? So that became kind of the focus of it. That's the future use of land and how to fund it part, yeah.
So you were motivated originally to do it by what? By meeting the need to reduce agricultural emissions to meet overseas carbon targets?
I would say we're motivated to do it because we recognise, I think there's a lot of opportunities for our land-based sector. We know it's a huge contributor to our overall economy, but in order to take advantage of those opportunities, we had quite a number of challenges. And part of them are environmental, but part of them are a lack of finance. Part of them are difficulty maybe accessing some of our markets. So we felt there were the barriers that may prevent us from achieving as much as we could from our land.
Okay, and the report ended up being called The Future Use of Land and How to Fund It. I note that you come from Lincoln University's Centre of Excellence in Transformative Agribusiness. Is that just words, or does that mean something? Transformative agribusiness.
It's quite a lot of words.
Yes.
The centre is internally funded from the university, and the aim really is to work across the different disciplines in the university. So I'm an economist myself, but we have people from the plant and crop science, people from the environmental science, and really the approach we're taking there is to think again, it's the fundamental idea that can we increase the value from our land whilst reducing some of these negative externalities that we have with it. And so we undertake projects or research trying to achieve those sorts of things, yeah.
Yeah, because at first blush, and I think certainly from many sector groups involved, the idea of intensifying or doubling exports from the horticultural and agricultural sector, whilst at the same time meeting greenhouse gas emission targets, seems to be almost contradictory, doesn't it? Hello? Sorry, we've just had Professor Renwick drop out. So we'll just try and, I'll try and get Professor Renwick back. Listen, it's while we get him back, the future use of land and how to fund it, this collaboration report, was developed with input, quote unquote, from leaders across the primary sector, including dairy, horticulture, sheep and beef, agri-tech, finance, and the government itself. The report explores 4 possible futures for New Zealand, and each scenario focuses on a single factor that will impact the food and fibre sector, for example, greenhouse gas emissions or the government's goal to double export values, and then pushes them to the extreme, demonstrating the pressing need for change. And the research actually sets out what are called 7 transformational pathways, such as diversifying farm systems to introduce mixed revenue streams, increasing horticultural production, and even unlocking underutilised Maori land, which is an issue in this country in actual fact. And the real problem there is nothing to do with the government. It's to do with Maori. There's so much multi-ownership of it. Come across it many times. Okay, we've got Professor Renwick back. Are you back, Alan?
I'm back, but not in picture, I'm afraid. Sorry, and I
Oh,
just missed your last point as I disappeared, actually.
that's all right. Okay. I was pointing out that it seems almost mutually contradictory. That on the one hand, you're having to try and, if you like, change land use optimization um, to meet, I guess, our international obligations around greenhouse gas emissions, whilst at the same time trying to match the government's goal of doubling export values.
Yeah, and that's one of the sorts of things we were looking at. So two of the scenarios we ran, one was let's reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and what happens, and the other was let's try and double exports and see what happens. And we kind of illustrate that without changing things, they are kind of mutually exclusive. And so that was part of the motivation about thinking about, can we do both? And we're arguing, I think, that there are examples and ways of doing things where we can both boost our exports and reduce our overall emissions to meet those requirements. Yeah, so
Well, that would
it was a
seem
real
that would
driver.
almost seem Pollyanna-ish, but I'm intrigued, and that's why we're having this conversation. That would be wonderful
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
could. All right,
yeah,
let's just go to that first scenario. So, if we were to meet all our international climate objectives, I guess you ran the scenario against just as things are at the moment. Would that
yes,
mean
yes, we did.
what would that mean, Alan, if you went that scenario all by itself?
That does mean reduced. Well, that does reduce value added from the sector. It does lower the amount of value we generate. It does lead to slightly more unemployment. Um, it does lead to quite a shift in our land use. So fundamentally, in all our scenarios, nearly beef and sheep farmers get quite squeezed. And what happens then is we have more forestry to take that up. So we do see some fundamental shifts in our land use, and reduced economic activity and some unemployment there.
So, in other words, that would hurt us as a country if we were to go down that path singly.
It would go down that path, if we go down that path with our current approach to land use.
Yeah.
That's what we were highlighting, that not changing anything and simply doing it really by shifting land from beef and sheep to forestry. That was what we were highlighting, yes.
Okay. And if we would go the other way, which was, I guess, the other scenario looked at, right, how are we going to double production in this country, double exports anyhow, volume?
Yeah.
What would be the consequence of that if we would just carry on with land use as it is at the moment?
Yeah, in that case, overall our emissions would go up, greenhouse gas emissions by up to 7%, but up to 16% on the farm level. But we looked beyond the farm level as well to the wider economy. Employment would rise, we'd get probably 70,000 more jobs in the sector. The overall value added would be about 5 billion, so it'd be an increase in our value added. But we would have, I mean, we didn't measure these environmental outcomes, but the indicators of them would get worse in terms of water quality, nitrates, E. coli, etc. All our environmental indicators would generally get worse because it's an intensification of our land use, and so that was the kind of the other sort of extreme with it. And again, that's just assuming we just carry on with our current technologies and systems and just change land use.
Okay. So you're saying if we want with the virtuous circle, if we want to make sure we can combine both, which would be the best possible outcome for New Zealand, then we need to change the way in which we use land in this country. Can I ask whether is there any particular type of land that strikes you as being clearly misused to meet this particular or these targets?
I don't know if I would say misused. I mean, I think what we've got is that we are overvaluing some of our intensive land uses because we're not taking account of the external costs with them, and maybe we're undervaluing some more of our extensive land uses. And so that creates a distortion in incentives in our system. So I think we are in a situation where we could get better signals to really reflect the true value from our land in that.
So you've gone through 7 scenarios that what are viable, or are just 7 scenarios to, you call them
Yeah,
transformational pathways.